Hello, my name is Mo. I am a designer with Red Hat, and I'm here today to give you a bootcamp absolute beginner's guide to Inkscape. Say you've heard great things about Inkscape and you've maybe even opened it up once or twice, but you weren't really sure where to get started. Well, I'm going to tell you where to get started. Here we go. We're going to open it right up. And I'm guessing that you've already got Inkscape installed. If you don't, it works on Windows, it works on OS X, it works on Linux, including Fedora, which is the awesome distro I'm using right now. Go to inkscape.org for more instructions on installing it, but as you probably well know, if you're using a Linux distro, it's probably already included and it's not really a big deal to install it. But it's very easy to install on OS X and Windows too. So I just opened up Inkscape. What do I see? I see this square in the middle of the screen. What is that? Well, that's the page. Inkscape has this notion of a page. Sometimes they call it a document. This dictates pretty much the shape and the size of the thing you're designing. And if you're printing, that's what will get printed out. If you export your page, anything within those boundaries gets exported. Anything outside of them does not. When you print, anything outside of them does not get printed. It can change. Inkscape doesn't have multiple pages. It's actually would be really nice if it did, but right now I use multiple files to simulate that. But there's a single page in Inkscape, a single document, and the document is square-sized. Now, you, of course, can do designs that are not, square, rectangular, but it will involve alpha blending. So, for example, if I draw a circle in the center of the screen, of course I can export that circle, but the file is going to be square, but any space around the circle is going to be transparent. So that's, simple stuff. So, one beginner tip. A lot of times I've seen beginners start to use Inkscape and they'll start using it right at this level, and they'll start pulling in circles and pulling in stars and pulling in swirls and doing all sorts of things with it. And actually, that's actually not too bad because I'm making them pretty big, but I've seen them do it this tiny, and they have this big, beautiful monitor, and they're working at this little tiny intricate size. Don't do that. Hit the number 1 key on your keyboard. That will zoom you in at 100%. And as I'm scrolling here up and down the document, that's the actual document size. Well, depending on your monitor's resolution and all that, but that's pretty close to the document's actual size. So you're not sort of doing precision surgical work. So that's my tip number 1 for you, is hit 1, zoom in at 100%. It's the first thing that I do when I open up a new document or if I open a file. Now, my second tip for you is sometimes, cats will jump on your hand, the boogeyman will come up behind you and scare you and you'll scream and your mouse will fall on the floor. Accidents happen and you can kind of get lost and then not be able to find your page anymore, what to do. Well, if you get lost like this, hit 5 to phone home. When you hit 5, it doesn't zoom you in at 100%. What it does is it zooms in to make everything on your page just fit within the viewport. So, what you can do when you get lost is hit 5 to phone home, then hit 1 to zoom in at 100 again. So, number 1 on your keyboard to zoom in at 100%. Number 5 to phone home in case you get lost. Okay. Now, I have one more beginner tip for you. When you're drawing something on the canvas, la 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 la. These are beautiful stars. They look pretty, shaped nicely for a star. What I've seen a lot of times happen is you'll go to size it down and it'll get a little skinny, or just somehow just will look a little squashed, or just somehow somewhat off. Well, you can prevent these things from happening. By default, Inkscape does not have the aspect ratio lock on. You can turn it on when you have the selector tool, which is that top black arrow in the left toolbox. It's a very top thing. This toolbar will be here. It'll be visible. And in the middle of that toolbar, we're just about in the middle, there will be an unlock icon. Click that icon, lock it. Now that's locking your aspect ratio. So now when I scale this star, he doesn't get all squashed and he doesn't get all squished. So that's a good tip for you. And this is especially important when you're working with text, because again, text is meant to be read, and that's not very readable, nor is that. You don't want that kind of stuff to happen. So hit the lock, lock it. Now you can scale safely. Another trick for you, actually, and I've been doing it all along as I've been showing you examples here. Ctrl Z undoes. Do it. If you make a mistake, please just Ctrl Z it. So here, watch. I'm going to squish this. Ctrl Z undoes it. I don't know how many steps back Inkscape stores Ctrl Z, but I think it does a pretty good job because I've almost never run into the problem where I had to go Ctrl Z back so many times that it didn't have it. If you don't remember the command Ctrl Z, you can also go to the edit menu and you can do undo. And it'll actually tell you when it undoes what that action will take. It also has, of course, an undo history dialog, which will list out all the things and you can kind of just jump back to what you wanted to do. Okay, so I have one more beginner tip in Inkscape for you, and that is Ctrl and Shift are magical keys. Throughout all of the tools in Inkscape, Ctrl and Shift will do special things. So for example, I have a square. It's a rounded edge square, very fancy. I'm going to move it with the arrows on my keyboard. Now you're going to want to move things with the arrows on your keyboard if you want to move them precisely, if you want things to be aligned within, say, certain intervals on the screen. Doing this with your mouse, because you have to control both X and Y at the same time, can be a bit haphazard. So you can actually align it where you want it and then make fine adjustments using the arrow keys. So I want to move this guy, and I'm hitting arrow and I'm hitting arrow. And I'm kind of feeling like I'm going to be hitting this all day and then the key's going to fall off my keyboard. That's no good. So what you can do is hold down Shift. Suddenly he's moving a lot faster. Or if I want to do really, really fine-tuned movement and this is moving him too far, I can hold down Alt and it will move 1 pixel by 1 pixel by 1 pixel by 1 pixel. Now this is all customizable too within the Inkscape preferences dialogs, but I think by default it does 1 pixel by 1 pixel by 1 pixel. I think left arrow and right arrow will do 2 pixels, and then holding down Shift, I don't know, I think it's like 10 pixels. So, you know, Alt is super slow, no Shift or Control or Alt is normal, and then Shift is super fast. And actually, I said Shift and Control are magical. Alt is magical too, because Alt is the one that lets you fine-tune. Alright, so let me give you another example. I'm using that selection arrow, and I'm clicking on the square, and you can see, yeah, I have all these arrows around the square object, and you might have noticed earlier I was grabbing the diagonal ones to scale. But you see, it's scaling from the opposite corner that I'm trying to scale from. Right, so I'm grabbing the lower left corner and it's scaling from the upper right corner. Well, what if I want it to grow from the middle? You know what I mean? There's some situations where, for example, I'm going to have, oh, I have the undo history selected. Okay, Control D to duplicate, and I'm going to make some of these guys. Okay, now for some reason I want that center to be bigger, but I don't want to scale it from the side because then it's no longer centered anymore. Like say I'm making a little diamond ring here, so I'll make it yellow gold, and then this is my diamond, not really, but whatever. And I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to hold down Shift. Now it's scaling from the center rather than scaling from those sides, so it's maintaining its centeredness. Let me show you another example. Say I want to rotate it so it's actually more like a diamond than a square. I'm going to click on it again, and you'll notice that those arrows surrounding the object just tilted. This means that the selector is now in rotating mode and rather than scaling mode. Whoops, hit it by mistake. You really want to scale, just click it one more time and it goes back. It's just kind of an on-off thing, although I clicked too many times that time. So I'm going to hold down, well, first of all, so I'm going to grab this and you can see it rotates. But, oh, I'm not sure what exactly is it, 90 degrees. So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo. And then I'm going to hold down Control, and then I'm going to drag. And you can see it's snapping at even intervals. Now you might notice that's not exactly centered, and the reason for that is that my square isn't exactly square. So there's a few ways I could fix that, but I'm just going to redraw. Oh, actually, there we go. So up here you can see the width and height, and I'm going to uncheck this, because if I say made this 200, this 200, this 200, I'm kind of fighting this game of, you know, the width versus the height because the aspect ratio is locked. So this is one of those cases where you want to take off the aspect ratio lock, adjust it to what you want, and then relock it. Now I want to center this, and I'm just going to eyeball it for now. Now I'm going to click it, hold down Control and drag, and now that's definitely in the center. So those are some examples of how Shift and Control are kind of magical in Inkscape. And Alt, don't forget Alt. So, you know, experiment when you're working with Inkscape, when you're working with any of the tools, try Control and Shift and see what they do. One final tip I'm going to leave you with in this little Inkscape Bootcamp here is you'll notice all these different tools, and you know, some of these are more useful than others, or at least for me. And I think, you know, maybe the ones I like are not all of the ones you like. But you're going to notice that as I'm clicking through these, watch this toolbar up here, each one of them changes. That's because they change to give you options that are specific to that tool. For example, if I click on a star, it lets me control the number of points on the star. If I click on a circle, it lets me control how filled in the circle is, and I can do a shearing of the circle, or I can actually do pie chart style cutting of the circle, and I can switch between the two. There is a calligraphy tool, and I can change the width of it. I can change whether or not it thins with speed or tablet pressure if I'm using a tablet. I can make it tremor, which is kind of a neat effect. And there's actually preset pen tools in here too, so if I want like a big weird wiggly brush, I can do that. If I want a marker type thing, I can do that, and I can change the width and still maintain the style. And then, of course, type. When I'm doing type, I can actually change the font here. It gives me a little preview of what the fonts look like. I can change the font size, all the basic stuff. But look out for this toolbar when you're working with these tools, because it'll give you hints at kind of what that tool can actually do. So I hope this little boot camp has helped you kind of understand the lay of the land when it comes to Inkscape and get some ideas for how you can start working with Inkscape.